Hello everyone and welcome to the GMAT Prep Camp on putting together your best admission application. My name is Betsy Kazizak and I'm going to be your moderator for this Hangout today. And joining me will be Neil Magnus from the University of Notre Dame Mendoza College of Business. Neil's actually having a few technical issues, so he should be joining us soon. And Jamie Young from the University of British Columbia, the Sauder School of Business. Now, Neil and Jamie are going to be sharing with you some important information, tips, and suggestions for helping you with your application. Now, before I turn it over to Jamie, though, I do want to share with you a little bit about who is GMAC. GMAC is the Graduate Management Admission Council, and we are makers of the GMAT. And I'm going to have Liz advance to the next slide. We're also working alongside a lot of leading business schools to help them connect talent, which is you, with schools. And we also offer test prep materials that are from the retired test questions of the GMAT. And yes, only GMAC offers you these types of prep materials. We also manage the content on MBA.com or GMAT.com, which is the official website of the GMAT. Now, the GMAT exam has been around for 60 years, helping students and schools connect. It's also the strongest and the most reliable indicator of your academic success in the first year of your program. It really helps schools to better understand your academic readiness, along with measuring the skills that are in demand in the business world. Now, the GMAT is accepted by over 5,800 programs. One more slide, Liz. With the majority of those schools actually being accredited programs that are accepting the GMAT for admission. So you might be asking, why should I take the GMAT? Well, the exam was designed by business schools with a specific focus on measuring skills necessary in school and work. Now, it truly is the exam to take if you have an interest in business or management programs to showcase your skills. The GMAT is actually a part of the application process, and it is important that you prepare and take it in advance, which Jamie's going to touch on a little bit later and give you some tips when he talks about your professional story. But for now, I want to dive into your application. The entire process takes time, preparation, and determination to put your best application forward. And Jamie and Neil are going to cover with you various aspects of the application process and how you can be prepared. Now, as a special bonus today, we are giving away a free GMAT paper test to the person who asks the best question. And so you have to ask a question to win. So as some of you have already started, you're submitting a lot of questions. Be ready to submit your questions throughout the entire Hangout. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jamie, who's going to actually lead you through your professional story.
Thank you, Betsy, and a quick thank you to GMAC and the entire group for putting together this Google Hangout and bringing everyone together today, in particular for adding that surprise. And so just a reminder for everyone, we can see the Q&A there and we see some great questions coming in. Please keep those coming. It's fantastic to know that there will actually be a reward for that best question to be asked today. My name is Jamie Young, and I'm one of the Associate Directors of Admissions and Student Recruitment at the Sauder School of Business at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. And along with Neil Magnus today, what we'll be doing is actually walking you through some generic advice or higher level advice that hopefully can provide you with a solid foundation to approaching all B school applications. So as you're looking at different possible schools or places that you may be interested in going to school for your MBA, hopefully some of this advice today will resonate across each and every single one of those programs. And so with that, we won't focus necessarily on the details of any one particular application. The most important thing that I think I can tell you today, and that I do want to tell you today, is to connect directly with admissions representatives from the schools where you're considering applying. They will be able to guide you and provide you with all the responses to your questions that will be helpful to put together your best application to that individual school. But without further ado, I do want to walk you through how to tell your professional story, and again, focus on some of the high-level advice that I provide to any candidates, and we'll do that by way of walking through your resume, your recommendations or your referrals, your undergraduate record, and in fact, if you've got any additional postgraduate education behind you, your GPA would be inclusive of that work perhaps. And then finally, I'll touch on the GMAT exam and a little bit about how you can prepare best for that GMAT itself. So we'll begin with the resume. And what I would like to do is to talk to you a little bit about how you can use the resume to showcase your professional story. So this is a great opportunity for you to stand out. As admissions professionals, I can tell you that we receive quite a large volume of applications each year, and with that, we want candidates to use every piece of their application as a great opportunity to stand out within your application. So the first point here is essential, and that's simply to review and update your resume. Most schools like ours will be looking to see that you've had great achievements within your career, and we want you to quantify those achievements where possible. So do try to focus and highlight those key work accomplishments and perhaps responsibilities that you might have within your current and previous roles. In the event that you're working for a company that's perhaps not known on a national or even international scale, if you're applying to schools that are abroad, it can be helpful sometimes to also indicate as part of your resume whom that organization is that you work for, if they have a website, even to share that type of detail, and certainly to consider providing a simple one-liner or one sentence about what the company or what the organization does with respect to their business interests, to build some understanding for the admissions team as they review those resumes. So try to think about your audience as you're putting that resume together. Certainly you want to review and update your work, but you also want to build some context within your achievements. So give some understanding to those companies or organizations that you're working for if they're not so well known, and try to really focus on quantifying your achievements if possible within those roles. One of the great tricks and techniques to use to do so is actually to lead with your work experiences. So chronologically, when we're looking at a resume, if you're able to highlight those great experiences that you've had towards the initial section of your actual resume, it's a great way to make an impression early on. And beyond that, you can also be action-oriented with your language. And so there's always going to be a look and feel to each piece of your application. And when you consider your resume and the look and feel that you'd like to have there, leading with action verbs within your actual resume in terms of the language can be a helpful way of demonstrating the things that you've accomplished and really trying to highlight the achievements that we'd like you to focus on. Some additional points I think that are helpful are always to mine your experiences for vivid examples that do illustrate your strongest traits. And so sometimes it's helpful if you can be specific. And when I say to quantify some of your achievements, that's one of the things that we mean is to really look into your own experiences and mine that professional history that you've had for some vivid examples of times where you've had great achievements or accomplishments within your work. For anyone joining us today with this Google Hangout who may be a career changer, and so somebody who's looking to an MBA program as a helpful way of transitioning or changing careers, also bear in mind how you can highlight any transferable skills. So again, keeping in mind who your audience is, and as Neil will focus on later, telling your personal story, thinking about exactly what you're trying to communicate to that admissions group are helpful things to have in mind, and hopefully these are some good tricks for you to have. The final point here is also an important one, and that's just with regards to the actual format. So a one-page resume is often ideal. I know we've got some great questions already from candidates about their level of experience, and so this is something that may vary depending on how senior your profile is or how much work experience you have to this date. But what I do want to convey to candidates is that as we read many admissions applications and go through many different resumes, it is essential that you can try to condense your professional achievements into ideally a one-page document. Here with the Sauder School of Business at UBC, we also accept two-page resumes, but beyond that, we often would not review the third or fourth or fifth page of a resume. And so just bear in mind, and again, going back to my first point, where possible, and it's always possible, do connect directly with those B schools where you're looking to apply, just to make sure that's consistent with the type of resume and the length that they would like to see and receive. So we'll talk a little bit now about your recommendations as well. And so this is the next piece for you in terms of how you can tell your professional story. So the first note here on this slide is really an essential one, and it's one that we cannot overlook. It's got great importance, and I think that we want to focus first on selecting who will speak on our behalfs. So when we imagine a reference, often we can think about perhaps selecting somebody who might have a very impressive title. And in the event that we don't work closely with that person, often what can happen is they may agree to provide a reference for you, but not be able to speak knowledgeably or with insight or perspective into your strengths and your abilities and some of the great work that you've done or the contributions or impact that you've made on the organization. So it's important to really think carefully and select carefully who will speak on your behalf. That's the first place, and it's a point that you want to take some time to consider and really be thoughtful with regards to whom you select to speak on your behalf, because these recommendations and referrals are an essential piece to almost all B-School applications. And again, they can really help you stand out, because this is somebody who can speak volumes about your abilities, or perhaps provide a very generic and bland recommendation that doesn't help you stand out in a competitive space again. Some schools may in fact require that you do provide referrals from your current or former supervisors. So often these are ideal, right? These are people who we know through your resume have been involved with you for X period of time. They likely have seen your contributions to that organization. And as I say, some schools will require this, but for many schools, your current or former supervisors are ideal people to have refer you. And that's something that I think you should consider, again, when you're thinking about who you will select to speak on your behalf. I know we've also had some questions today from people in startups or small organizations, and so there's a number of different scenarios, that perhaps being one of them, where project managers or team members, even clients or vendors, might provide you with great referrals, and they could be really strong voices to speak for you in terms of your application. So do check with every school. B-Schools will have their preferences. Often with MBA programs, we will consider professional references to trump academic references. The reason for that being they're usually most current, and so they're often considered to be most relevant for us. And then from there, whether it's a current or a former supervisor, whether it's somebody who you've worked with in a professional capacity on a project or within a team, or somebody who you've worked with externally, but with great experience as a client or vendor, these things are all perhaps people that you could consider as your potential referees. In terms of volunteer opportunities, if you've had extensive volunteer opportunities, breadth and depth is something that a lot of MBA programs will look at, so it's another piece that you could look to when you're considering who might be a strong referee on your behalf. Some schools, like ours for instance here at Sauder, will have a mandatory number of recommendations, and so in our case that's 2, but you have the option of providing a 3rd reference. And so maybe that's a good example of a time where you could consider 2 professional referees and 1 referee who is coming from an academic or even a volunteer opportunity. Always, always talk to and share your plans and ask the person if they'd be willing to write you a positive recommendation. And the keynote there being positive recommendation before moving ahead with that referee on your application. Take that person out to coffee or tea or water. Just take the opportunity to connect, talk to them about your plans, and make sure that they have a good understanding of why you're applying to that school, what you're looking to do with your MBA, and really help them write a good reference for you without coaching them too much or writing it yourself.
Hey, Neil, or Jamie, before you move on to your next section, we do have a question on recommendations. And this person wants to know, they're wanting to know, can a personal friend be a recommender? Do you recommend that?
Yeah, great question, and thank you for asking, Betsy. So Neil, please add here as you wish as well, but perhaps I'll take this on initially and just say that anybody whom you know personally would perhaps be able to share things objectively with us that are really helpful, but ultimately it's hard to convey that level of objectivity when we understand that the relationship is a personal one. And so Mother's Day has just passed here, I know, in North America on our calendar. So for instance, if your mother or if a good friend or a family member is looking to refer you, that likely will not make as strong of an impact as somebody who we understand has very much seen you in a professional capacity, does have a strong level of objectivity and is able to speak on your behalf with respect exclusively to almost your professional abilities, achievements, and your accomplishments. And so going back to that very first point on the referee slide, carefully select who you will have speak on your behalf and recommend you. And I think that if you can, we want to limit that to people who are not necessarily connected to you by way of a personal relationship. So that may be friends or family. There are instances, of course, where business and family or business and friends do overlap. And so those are judgment calls that you'll have to make on your behalf. And I think that it's important to connect with schools directly, talk to them about that scenario, and perhaps they can share with you whether or not they think that particular circumstance would merit you having a friend whom you work with in a startup company actually provide you with that referral. But overall, I would say stay with professional recommendations who do have that strong level of objectivity with your recommendation as much as possible. Okay. So hopefully that addressed that question. I anticipate that we'll have lots more questions today, but we'll continue on and talking about your professional story, and we're moving all the way back now to your undergraduate transcripts. So some of these notes are more technical in nature than others, but certainly requesting copies of all of your academic records from any institutions that you've attended in post-secondary education is essential. This is really where you'll begin to get your ducks in a row, so to speak. When you put together an application, and certainly when you put together several applications, if you're looking at more than one B school for your MBA program, this is something that is helpful in organizing your overall application. So do be mindful of the time and the process and some of these technical points, and requesting copies of all of your academic records is something you'll have to do at some point. So do start to get in touch with your previous academic institutions and organize some of those transcripts to be sent to the admitting schools or the schools that you're applying to. You'll want to mine your own records or your own transcripts personally to look for hiccups or trends in grades. And what's important here is to note that admissions schools and representatives are very much looking through every detail of your application, and they'd love for you to be able to talk about any areas of weaknesses or hindrances within your application, rather than them necessarily consider those without greater context. So if you've had a grade, let's say in your first or second year of undergraduate, that wasn't that strong and didn't represent your ability in that course, perhaps you can show them that you've retaken that course at some stage and that you've actually got an improved grade and you really feel comfortable with areas within accounting, if that was the course, or statistics or economics or any course really. But it's essential that you do look for hiccups or trends in grades. If there's been a positive trend and through your first year all the way to your fourth year you've seen an increase in your GPA overall, the cumulative GPA does not necessarily reflect your strength in your more senior level courses, then perhaps that's something that you can share with the admissions committee at the point of interview or even earlier. And so always be mindful of potential hiccups or trends in grades and be able to speak knowledgeably and candidly about those areas should those B schools that you're applying to want to talk a little bit more about that. You also want to be prepared to discuss any gaps or areas of concern. So just continuing on that trend, this is your professional story. It begins with your undergraduate transcript, it carries through your resume and through your recommendations, but we'd like to be able to identify a relatively linear story. So when you apply, you'll want to make sure that if there are any gaps or areas of concern, if there's any trends or hiccups in your grades that might be noticeable, that you're aware of those, you're able to show some self-awareness when talking about them because you've done your research, you've looked into your own profile, and you understand how an admissions group might be looking at those as well. Any postgraduate education would also be considered with most schools. So in the event that you actually have completed a master's degree already, perhaps in a different area, do be mindful of this as well. And again, going back to that, requesting copies of all your academic records, that might include exclusively your undergraduate transcripts, but if you've completed more work, then perhaps it would include your graduate level coursework as well. And then another note here, just to suggest that with our audience today, I expect we've got a great range of people who are here with the Google Hangout who have experience maybe that's very junior, or people who are 1 year into their career, or people who are 10 years plus into their career and maybe have a more senior profile. your GPA may become less important the longer that you've been out of school. That's something to check with all admitting schools, but as a theme today, it's important to note that this is good advice at a high level for everyone to consider. And so if you're somebody who's just recently graduated and you're working towards your career early on, this may be an important factor with your admissions decision. If you've been out of school for 10 years, then again, take all of this advice, be aware of the trends or the hiccups, but also be conscious of these things that you've been doing since you've graduated, and note that the GPA is taken into context with all of your professional story. The final note here before we move on is just to perhaps consider taking courses now that might be lacking from your undergraduate years. So in the event that you're very strongly interested in marketing and you've never taken courses in that area, perhaps that's a good idea to show an admissions committee and to show a B school that you really do have a sound fundamental understanding and that you've actually worked towards your area of interest. So you may want to consider as part of your professional story to take courses now that might have been lacking from your undergraduate program or your undergraduate years. And here, this will be my final slide before we pass things over to Neil Magnus from Notre Dame. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about the GMAT exam itself. I know Betsy talked a little bit about GMAT as a group, as a whole, their history, and certainly the wealth of resources that they provide for candidates who are considering B schools and specifically who are looking to prepare for writing the GMAT exam. But to give you a sense, this is an exam that's widely accepted by most, if not all, B schools. As you're looking to prepare your MBA application, this is going to be one of the essential pieces. It will tie into your professional story. So where there's trends that show your quantitative area isn't so strong, perhaps the GMAT's able to complement those grades on your transcript with a great score in that sectional area, or vice versa. Perhaps you're able to really highlight your verbal skills as part of your GMAT where you had some hindrances or weaknesses as part of your transcript. But the advice we have for you today is really to prepare, prepare, prepare. The GMAT is a CAT test, or a computer adaptive test. It's often a unique test with respect to your history of test taking. So for many of us, this may be a unique test taking scenario, and you'll want to prepare as much as possible for this exam. And there are some great resources through MBA.com and through GMAT.com where you'll get sample questions and prep materials and even registration info. So I think that's certainly a very good place to start as you're looking at B schools and you're looking at applications, is also to reference GMAT.com and MBA.com for some sample questions from the GMAT group and some good prep materials. It's a good baseline to build an understanding for this test. You can take the test and actually bank that score. It is valid for up to 5 years. And so if you're somebody who's got some projects with respect to your work portfolio, and perhaps you recognize that there's an opening in your calendar where you can dedicate some time towards this test, take it and bank it. The scores are valid for up to 5 years. Use some of those GMAT prep materials. The download is free online. And one of the things that we'll want to talk about today, and certainly Neil and I can shed some light on, is just not to rule out a school based on your test score alone. Most schools, if not all schools, will be considering the GMAT score in a greater context with a holistic or comprehensive approach to admissions. And each school will have particular things where they'll place a strong emphasis or where there will be a good fit with candidates. And so the GMAT score is going to be a part of that, but please don't go about eliminating schools or ruling out schools simply based on your test score alone. Try to connect with those schools directly and allow them to tell you a little bit more about how they receive the GMAT and what they're looking for in candidates overall. And then finally here, before I pass things over to Neil to talk about your personal story and how to prepare your best MBA application, just a reminder to really believe in yourself, and do develop a plan, stick to it, and ultimately we have a strong belief that you'll have the opportunity to succeed if you take the time to develop that plan and stick to it and really be positive throughout the entire process, because we understand it can be a stressful one, and certainly if you've reached this stage in your career where you're considering an MBA program, you've got a great opportunity now to take your career to the next level through an MBA, and the GMAT is one part of that. So I'll pass things over here to Neil to have him talk to you a little bit about how you can tell your personal story as part of your overall MBA application as well.
Hi, Jamie. We are having technical difficulties right now. We were thinking that we would do some Q&A in the meantime while we're waiting for Neil to get back on. It looks like he got kicked off. So why don't we start with this top question here? What are the scholarships available for MBA programs?
Fantastic. Thank you, Liz. And Praveen, thank you for asking that question. I see that it's plus 15 here in our Google Hangout, which means that there's at least 15 people who are interested in learning a little bit more about scholarships. Unfortunately, I won't be able to provide too much detail beyond the simple advice that I've shared already, which is to connect directly with each business school that you're looking to apply to consider each one of their scholarships. Every school will likely have scholarships and potentially bursaries available. The nature of their scholarship decisions and how they award or allocate those scholarships will be unique to each individual school. I can tell you that for ourselves here at the Sauder School of Business at UBC, we have extensive scholarships for candidates domestically and international. As our program, our MBA program, is one of the more international programs within B schools in North America. And so the nature of our scholarships will be reflective of what we're looking to do and what we're looking to build within our MBA program and where we see our MBA grads going within their careers. So the scholarships are something that's going to be uniquely tied to each one of the B schools that you're applying to. And I don't think that I would be doing anyone justice today if I were to give you a response that was all-encompassing for every school beyond telling you that most schools will have scholarships. They'll have scholarships available for typically the elite or the top maybe 10 to 15% of their incoming classes, though that will vary by school. So some schools will have larger scholarship funds than others. And if this is something that's really essential or important to you when considering an MBA program, then I would strongly recommend doing your research through their websites and social media channels, and also connecting directly with their admissions representatives at each one of those B schools. So to answer your question, there are scholarships available at our MBA program, as with, I can tell you, certainly Neil's MBA program at Notre Dame. And when we look largely at scholarships in the MBA context, they are available typically from most MBA programs, and they're typically awarded to the strongest candidates coming into the program. And that word strongest is usually tied to your fit to a program. And so if they've got streams or specialties, then perhaps your strength in areas that they're very good at would be tied to a positive scholarship decision. But the best way to find out is to reach out, connect with those schools directly, do some simple high-level research on their websites. Usually they'll have sections on admissions and finance where you can see scholarships and awards, and always where there will be a contact us, and you can follow up directly with those schools to hear from the schools that you are actually looking to apply to. So Praveen, thank you for that question. I hope that provides you with a greater understanding of scholarships and MBA programs, and ultimately there's a great range there that you'll see with different schools, their programs, the actual value of their scholarships and how they allocate those, and it's important to do some research and to connect with them directly to understand what each school can offer you by way of a scholarship.
Thank you, Jamie. Let's do one more question before we return to the presentation. This one was submitted by Tana. How do I make sure my professional accomplishments outshine the length of time in my current job? I have only been in my current job for 2 years, but have completed many projects and want to make sure the length of time isn't seen as an inexperience.
Yeah, thank you, Liz, for sharing, and thank you, Shauna. I see you have a few questions here, so please continue to stay engaged. That's excellent to see these questions. So to address your question directly, if you're somebody who does not necessarily have a great length of experience, and so when you look at that number of years that you've got in this instance, let's say 2 years in a particular role or even 2 years in your career, but you've had great accomplishments and achievements within that time, there's a number of ways that you can really help stand out with respect to your applications and really help yourself stand out with regards to your achievements. One of the ways you can do so is, of course, through your resume. So if you're able to quantify your achievements, we're not always able to do this, but going back to our resume and how you can use that to stand out, if you are able to focus on your achievements within that role, and if you're able to quantify those achievements where possible, That's a great way to actually show admissions committees and representatives and B schools that you're applying to your contribution to the organization. So it's a really helpful way. If you can mine all of those experiences that you've had over 2 years, and if you've really had a wonderful impact on that organization, there should be some vivid examples that you could perhaps provide as well within a 1 to 2 page resume, where you're really able to set yourself apart as somebody who's got 2 years, but who certainly has some great achievements to outshine some of the competition with your application, and really to make yourself stand out to admissions representatives. Another way, of course, is through your recommendations or through your referees. And so I know I spoke length through that section about carefully selecting whom will speak on your behalf for your application. I imagine that if you've really had some amazing professional accomplishments within that 2-year period, you'd have a number of people, whether it was in project management, because I know that you indicated, Tana, that you've actually got some project experience there. So you could have people who've worked on those projects with you who could speak very knowledgeably and provide great insight into your contribution and impact and help you stand out. You may also have an opportunity for your supervisor there if your overall 2 years with that organization has been a great experience where you've had a number of accomplishments. So you might have somebody who speaks specifically to some of your projects. You might also have the opportunity for somebody to speak largely about your contribution over those 2 years. So I think your resume and your referrals are going to be 2 ways that you can absolutely make the most of those 2 years of experience that you've had.
Hey, Jamie, it's Betsy. I got back onto the Hangout. Gotta love technology. Sometimes you get kicked out. And I understand that Neil is also continuing to experience a little bit of technical issues. So because of time, how about you and I jump into telling their personal story? And if you want, I can lead off with the essays, and I'll let you take it over with interviews. So I'll give you a little bit of a break. How's that?
That sounds great, Betsy.
Okay. So Liz, if you could maybe pull us up back to telling your personal story. And I think you got it up. I got to remember I have to click on it so I can see it. All right, so the next section we want to cover with all of you is essays, interviews, and some other considerations. So for your essays, it's a fantastic way to showcase your personal story. And there's a lot of different ways that you're going to be able to do this with the schools. Every school is going to have some slightly different questions. But I would say some very common ones are what you see up in front of you. A lot of schools are going to want to know why them. And so to really understand why this program is a good fit, why you're interested in their particular areas of study. I saw a lot of questions come in like, you know, considering full-time versus part-time programs, MS programs versus MBA. So really understanding the program and being able to explain that in your essays. They will also want to know, you know, a little bit more about you and your career goals. Are you going to be a good fit for the program? And so again, trying to address some of those issues in the essays. I think someone had a question regarding their undergraduate record and using maybe the essays as an opportunity to explain some maybe lack of the best performance as an undergrad, I think is how they might have phrased it. So to take advantage of using the essays to be able to explain, again, some of those hiccups that Jamie had mentioned earlier. As Tana had asked about some work experience, this is a great way to tell your story. And to really think about addressing the question at hand. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the game show Jeopardy, where you have to respond with the answer with a question. That's a great way of making sure that you've addressed your essay. So when someone reads your essay, they need to respond back to you, and the question is, and then based on what you've said, hopefully you've addressed the actual essay question. Things to kind of keep in mind when going through your essays. Like I mentioned, make sure that you answer the question that's being asked. Keep in mind formatting. Some schools may have a word limit and or a page limit. Always review your essays and have someone edit. I used to be an admissions director, and I used to chuckle when I would read someone's essay and they would talk about how wonderful this school was and how fantastic this program was, and then they would mention a totally different school's name. Now, we all know you're applying to multiple programs, which is fine, but just make sure that when you are writing your essay that you are addressing it to the particular school, and then if you are going to do a little cut and pasting, that you've done your due diligence and really kind of edited through everything. Some schools will have, specific instructions for you in your essays. So one essay might be some type of format that they want in an outline where it's not really written in a paragraph format. Some may have, I think one school actually did a tweet once, so as part of their essays. So you have to tweet out in I think, 140 characters or less, a response to a particular question. Be sure if you're going to quote or use someone else's work that you give them credit. So, be mindful of plagiarism. That has come up quite frequently in the last few years with the admissions directors, and as they have, kind of taken notice that sometimes plagiarism is out there. So just be mindful that you give credit where credit is due, and just make sure that you stand out and you sell yourself. Your essays are an opportunity for you to showcase who you are as a candidate, and it's a great way to point out your strengths. It's also a good way to kind of acknowledge some of your weaknesses and how you are overcoming them. And I always said to candidates, look, you get to tell me who you are, so you don't have to share everything there is to know about you. So pick and choose the information you want to share with the admissions teams. So just remember, your essays are a great way for you to influence the admissions reviewers as they're going through and looking at all the different candidates and making sure that you can stand out. Interviews are another great way, and I'm going to turn it over to Jamie to kind of give you an overview on some interview tips.
Thank you, Betsy. And just to make one quick note there with respect to the essays, I think that's an excellent point to consider when you are writing those essays. And so if you watch Jeopardy, maybe you're able to look at the questions that way. But as an admissions representative for a B school here, I think that's fantastic to consider writing the question and making sure that somebody you share that response with would be able to identify the question. Because as much as this is a great opportunity for you through your essays to share your personal story, we also want to make sure you go ahead and answer the question that was asked, because on the most simple level, it's important to follow directions as part of your application. So thank you, Betsy, very much for that advice around your essays. I think very good advice and sage advice to follow. It's clear, of course, that Betsy not only works for GMAT, but clearly had experience in admissions prior to this, and I know that's something that she's had a lot of experience with. So I'll pick up then with interviews now and talk to you a little bit about a number of the sections within your interview. So we've got this section broken down for you, and here you'll see our pre and post interview points. So some things to consider, of course, are what did you wear? This is perhaps not as simple a question as sometimes you would think, but you can actually do yourself a real favor here by considering the culture within the school that you're applying, the B school that you're applying. You likely can't overdress. I know as Neil was talking about this section, as these are his original slides, he did have the caveat there that potentially a tuxedo might be too much. And so beyond that, you really can't overdress. You want to make sure that you do present yourself professionally, that you show your interest and your intent with the B school. And generally speaking, you really can't overdress or be too professional for that opportunity in terms of your appearance and your overall dress. Think a little bit about how do you present yourself. And so going into that experience, one of the ways to imagine the impression that you'd like to make is to consider if you would be easy to get along with. Many MBA programs are recognized and they're highly sought after because of their experiential model. They've got a great network of people coming together who have forged wonderful careers for themselves thus far and have a great level of ambition and ability that they're going to use an MBA program to pair with that ability and ultimately to take them to that next place in their career. So you've got this wonderful experience and this group of people coming together. We want to bring people into MBA programs and into our schools who are easy to get along with, have a strong level of EQ and group consciousness, and they're able to build relationships and to really connect with others. And so one of the ways that you can approach the interview, whether it's a committee interview or whether it's a one-on-one interview, is to imagine to yourself, how did you present yourself? Were you dressed professionally? Did you really make the most of that opportunity and really get some of those small things right? And then were you somebody that would have been easy to get along with? Did you show that demeanor to all office staff that you encountered? To our alumni, perhaps, that you might have been in touch with, to students whom you've met within our programs. Most MBA programs and communities are relatively small, and they've got a dedicated staff, faculty, and their alumni, their current students, those staff, that faculty, they're often all in touch. And so we're usually aware of it if you've had those opportunities to connect with our alumni and to connect with our current students. We're certainly aware of your interactions with the office staff and people whom you might have come in contact with through our program. So try to make sure that you show that demeanor, show that group consciousness, and show an ability to connect with and forge relationships with others throughout the process. Really take a 360 approach when you're considering these things. It's pre and post interview, right? So it's encompassing of more than just that opportunity where you're in the room being formally interviewed. Was your demeanor forced or natural? This is an important point as well, right? We want to coach you a little bit. We want to give you advice more than anything on how to approach this scenario, but ultimately we want to enable you as well to show your personality, be natural, try to let your personality come through. This is part of your telling your personal story, and so if you're trying to show a demeanor that isn't that natural, that will also be conveyed to us. And so you'll want to make sure that you're easy to get along with, but don't change or radically make adjustments to your personality as much as you want to just be aware that everyone whom you're in contact with and everyone that you're in touch with is really a part of this pre and post interview process, and you want to make the most of those impressions. Think about how difficult you were to work with during scheduling. So was it a challenge to schedule your interview, or did you read the instructions? If it was a Skype interview or in-person interview, or if it was 45 minutes or 1 hour, did you arrive on time? These are all things that demonstrate professionalism. They'll give us a sense as to whether or not you're a high maintenance candidate, and whether perhaps coming into our program you're going to provide us with a lot of administrative work and help and support, because we will need to continue to support you throughout the program if you've demonstrated to us perhaps that you're a high maintenance candidate coming in. So just be aware throughout, again, all stages of exactly the kind of impression that you're making on that B school, and be sensitive to that. Think about, as a post-interview, sending a follow-up email or letter. I know I'm speaking a little bit on Neil's behalf here as well, because he's done a great job in preparing this Google Hangout and wanted to be here. And so I can tell you that for Neil, he did share that often they prefer, and even strongly prefer, a letter. That really makes a difference sometimes at Notre Dame and at the Mendoza school there. So consider each one of the schools. That's always sage advice. Consider their best practices and the way that you want to approach those MBA applications, and the culture of those programs will often give you a good idea as to whether or not you would want to send a follow-up email or letter, and even if within those, if there's an advantage to sending perhaps a more personalized letter or an email. Often, and you can probably hear it in my intonation, if you do a great job writing a follow-up letter there, that shows great interest, and it definitely helps us understand how much thought and energy you've put into your overall application.
Hey, looks like Neil is back. So Neil, we kind of started your section for you. So I covered essays. Jamie took the first jump at the interview. So do you want to take off with during the interview?
Yeah, sure thing. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Actually, no, I cannot hear you now.
Okay.
Oh, now I can.
Okay. All right. Well, we should be good to go. I apologize for the technical difficulties here, and we are looks like and during interview in the career focus section. Is that correct?
Yeah, we are. It looks like we have a slightly different slide deck up, so but this is the career focus.
Okay. Well, thanks, Betsy and Jamie. Sorry for the technical difficulties again. My name is Neil Mangus. I'm the Associate Director of MBA Admissions here at the University of Notre Dame. And I'm going to be talking about the personal story here. I'm just going to jump right into the interview specifically here. And so what we're really looking at here is basically we're looking for certain qualities that are similar to what recruiters will be looking for when they'll be conducting an MBA, either for an internship or for a full-time job. So what you'll want to do is treat this as you would, say, interviewing for your dream job. So you really want to shine through here. Remember to be comfortable, professional, listen to the interviewer and what they're asking for you. Make sure to make eye contact and be straightforward with them. Don't try to cover things up that aren't quite true, because most admissions officers have been around the block and done a few thousand interviews, so we've sort of seen that before. So make sure that you're straightforward and honest throughout the interview. The next topic is going to be the topic of interest during the interview. So what we're looking at here is how interested are you really in our program? This can be showcased by how much research that you've done on our program or any MBA program for that matter. Have you checked the website? That's sort of the easy way out here. But have you spoken to other people who've maybe been through the program and are now an alumnus, or even current students are definitely willing to help you out and provide you with information on the program that can help you to position yourself as you're applying, and especially when you're interviewing with someone on the admissions committee. They're going to look for that. So make sure to do your research, to speak with people, and to showcase that through examples in the interview. And our next section here is going to be about intellectual ability. So this is another area that you'll want to showcase not only in your interview, but you'll be able to showcase throughout the rest of the application. You'll showcase that with your undergraduate transcript, your undergraduate GPA, your GMAT or GRE scores, and a whole plethora of other ways you can showcase your intellectual ability, but you can also do that in the interview, and admissions officers will look for that. So make sure to use a logical format when you're preparing your answers, and this will apply throughout the interview. You can use one of the most common used formats is the STAR, and that's the situation, task, action, result format, where you sort of lay the groundwork for what were you faced with, what was your task in front of you, what actions did you take, and how did that turn out for you. It sort of gives the interviewer a good idea of the entire situation, and that's something that they'll look for, and that's a way that you can sort of show that you've prepared and that you will be able to present in any of your classes well. The next section is going to be about program-specific topics in the interview. So this section's here to let you know that many schools will ask questions that will allow you to sort of showcase how much research that you've done on their program and how you might fit with their program. For example, at Notre Dame, you may encounter a question about ethics and values. Hint, hint. That is something that we look for when it comes to fit with our program. So we will ask about that. And if you have done your research and you've spoken to other students who have recently gone through the interviews, you can really find out what sort of questions they'll ask that are program specific. And what you'll really want to do that will set you apart is to include specific examples of how you meet those program-specific criteria, or ways that you have addressed situations or had an experience that showcases how you fit with that program specifically, which may be different from another program. So finally, I'm going to cover case questions as far as the interview goes. Now, these questions are pretty standard with MBA programs, so you should expect to get one or two case type of questions as you're interviewing with different schools, as many programs are now case-based. So it's a way for admissions officers and the people interviewing you to sort of gauge your ability at how well you will perform through their program and the academia side of things, and also on the practical side of things when you're potentially doing case competitions and that. And what we're looking for here really is, are you cool under pressure? Are you able to think deeply about the situation that's being presented to you? Are you able to respond in a logical format? And how worldly is your knowledge? Are you aware of what they're asking about? And can you bring in outside information to add depth and value to how you're answering? So that's what we're looking for in the case question. So those are things that you can do some research for, you can do a little bit of preparation for, but a lot of schools will kind of hit you out of left field and try to maybe throw a curveball at you. So be prepared and structure your answers and take heed to some of the other points that we've talked about throughout this presentation, and they will apply to this section as well. So now I'd like to talk about some other considerations. First is fees and fee waivers. This is something that it never hurts to ask with MBA programs. We know that it can get pretty expensive applying for 5, 6, 7, sometimes 8 or 9 MBA programs at around $150 to $250. We can understand that can get expensive, and oftentimes MBA programs will give out fee waivers to encourage people to apply. So it never hurts to ask. We will not hold that against you. Additionally, we've got PowerPoint or Prezi presentations, written reflection of the interview, and video essays. These are some other ways that schools will allow you and sometimes require you to present a little bit more about your personal or professional story. Everything that we've talked about today in our presentation will apply here. So if you apply those same methods and tips here, you will typically do well, and it's just a supplemental piece of information for admissions committees to use as they're making their decisions. Social media here. Social media is something you do want to be aware of, you do want to be cautious about, as not all but many programs do pay attention to your social media pages. If they can get a hold of a public profile or any posts that you've made, it is something that they will take into consideration when they're determining your fit with their program. So be careful about that, be cautious. Not saying to remove the personal feel or the personal touch that you've put with your pages, but if your personal life and what you've posted publicly doesn't quite match, that may be a hindrance on your admission to that specific program. So make sure that as well matches at least a little bit to the programs for which you're applying. Again, behavior and communicating. Be sure that all your communications, all your behaviors are on point, and that they are presenting you in a professional manner, because you never know who could be affiliated with the school and who may give feedback. When they know that you've applied, they'll typically give the admissions office a call and say, I encountered this person, and that can be a really good thing or it can be a very bad thing sometimes. So pay attention to your behavior in the community. And speaking of community, more program specific here, but I know a lot of programs are moving more towards corporate social responsibility. So community service and volunteering are things you may want to get involved in. They may be asked of you in the interviews. And again, speaking with current students and alumni will help you to determine your fit for a program. So make sure to take advantage of that. They can really clue you in and give you a foot forward when you're applying for programs. So with that will conclude our presentation here today, and now I guess we'll open up for the question and answer section. Thank you.
We will. We have a lot of questions that are coming in.
All right, well, I think we are going to answer some questions. Let's go here with the first one. Neil, let's grab you since Jamie answered some questions earlier. Let's start with this first question here. What is the best book for GMAT preparation?
The best book for GMAT preparation. Boy, that is a tough one. There are many out there. You know what? The best book, I'm not going to pull out a specific one because it varies for each person. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. It varies from person to person. What you'll want to do is find the book that matches you the best. You know, there's something out there for everyone. There's probably 6 books on GMAT preparation. And what you can do is I'd recommend a Google search and look for what fits your lifestyle. If it's an audio book, look up an audio book and listen to it in the car. If it's something where you need a lot of practical experience with, then your Princeton reviews and your Manhattan GMAT, those types of books, those are going to help you out. There's a lot of practical experience through that you can work through. So do a little bit of research before you pick the book that's right for you. There's no magical way through, but whatever fits for you and your lifestyle is going to help you study the best. That's what you should go with.
Well, Neil, don't you think that maybe on MBA.com or GMAT.com we have all those great GMAT prep books with retired test questions?
Those are also great resources. I didn't want to make the cheap plug, but
all right, I will. Well, thanks, Liz, for standing in for me. Apparently, I was on mute, so that's good. Jamie, I'm going to toss this question out to you as we have just a few more minutes. This one was on essays, and they wanted to know that if they're writing their essay and they're talking about their career plans, should they have a firm career plan, or could they maybe hint at 1, 2, 3, 4 different career options?
Yeah, thanks, Betsy, and thank you to whomever asked that question within the Google Hangout here. My response is going to be quite simple in that I think it's important to be authentic. There's a couple things that we can certainly look at, and that will help answer the specific question. But most importantly, we need to be authentic as a person representing ourselves to a B school or to an admissions committee. Be yourself, and if you're quite clear on your career goals, and if the question is with regards to your career goals, you can only answer with your genuine and your truest response. And so if you do have a very clear, very specific focus within your career and you know exactly where you'd like to go following the MBA program, then perhaps that's the response that you would best be served by providing. But beyond that, if you're somebody who is entering a program and the program perhaps allows you to go down several different career paths, and that's exactly what you're hoping to do, is to enter the program and use that as potentially one of the ways that you'll figure out how you want to move forward in your career, and with respect to your career focus, how you will focus your professional interests, then that would also be a strong response. So I think the important thing is to be authentic. You cannot provide a response to us that isn't genuine, and I think really do yourself or do the admissions committee any service. Ultimately, that's something that will probably come out later, maybe at the point of interview. As Neil talked about those interviews, you see that there's a lot of questions, and ultimately programs will want to at some point determine fit. And so if your response was not authentic and that comes out at some later point, then you haven't helped either yourself or the program. So try to be authentic, try to see the fit with the program and with what they do, and try to bring those two things together by way of your response. And as always, as Betsy talked about and as I touched on, make sure you do answer the question directly. And so if the question is very specific, try to be as catered to that as possible within your own response.
Okay, great. There's a lot of questions on here regarding scholarships, and unfortunately today we're not going to have the time to address scholarships or other financial aid, but that is something that I would highly recommend going to the individual schools, looking up what opportunities they have for various types of aid, scholarships, fellowships, other forms of financial aid. So definitely check that out. And I know we're running a little bit over, but I do want to take another question. And Neil, I'll toss this one out to you. How do B schools view applicants who want to do a dual or joint degree, and how should maybe you address that in your application?
That's a great question. We do take quite a few joint degree program applicants. We typically, because of the rigor of those types of programs, we may look for aspects about your application that truly show that you can handle the workload of doing a joint program like that. So you'll want to really highlight how you've performed in undergrad. If you're currently in another program, a lot of programs, a lot of universities will have the program specific to their school. So if you get into, say, a JD program and you've already taken a year, you can apply to an MBA program and make it a joint JD MBA. So you'll want to really highlight your performance all the way up to that application and say, I've done really well so far. I've taken on a lot of extra work and I've excelled at it. And if you haven't, then that's really telling us something about your capabilities, your ability to handle that much casework. So you'll want to really make it shine, because a lot of programs will sort of hold you to a little bit of a higher standard just because it is that much more difficult to succeed in a program like that.
Okay, great. Well, our time has come to an end, and we actually went a little over, so I want to thank all of you for continuing to stay with us online. One of the questions, and actually a couple people have asked this, will this be posted? It is a live recording, and yes, we will be posting it. So if you had to log off early or came in a little bit late, you'll be able to catch up and watch the recording later. So to kind of wrap up, I had to pick a winner for the best question, and let me tell you, that was tough because there's actually quite a few questions, but I really like this one because it had a focus on work experience. So the winner is Tana Lynch. And Tana, if you can send an email to socialmedia@mba.com, we'll send you the details on how you can collect your prize. And actually, to enter and win more prizes, including a GMAT exam registration voucher, definitely go out to mba.com/prepcamp2014. So on behalf of GMAT, the makers of the GMAT, we'd like to thank you for joining us in the Hangout. We hope you found that the tips and suggestions have been helpful in putting together your application. So we wish you all the best as you pursue your educational goals. Thank you.